Hi Sam, how are you?
I'm okay, Nicola. How are you doing?
Thanks. Shouldn't wait till 5 past again.
That is absolutely okay with me.
Okay, I do have a hard deadline of 5 today though. I've just got another webinar to attend.
Okay. A hard deadline of 5:30?
No, 5.
Okay, that's fine. That's okay.
Okay, thanks. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the third in the series of, or the third and final in the series of webinars presented by Samuel Otim, who is our data science expert for this SADC Innovation and Investment Challenge. The title of today's webinar is Scaling Sustainably, and I will let you take it from here, Sam.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this third and final webinar in a series of 3. As I like to do, I'll do a quick recap just to get us acquainted and make sure everybody's on the same page. And of course, for those who might have missed out on day 1 of 3, I'll also do the summary for the benefit of everybody. My hope is everyone can hear me loud and clear, so I will just fire away, and if you can't hear me, by all means, say something in the chat. Day 1, we started by talking about perspective, which is basically how you see the world, a very important aspect as you plan out your innovations and as you build the system that you're putting together. Understanding your audience is also another critical aspect. It helps when you know the language that your audience uses and you speak to them in a language that they understand. Looking at the strategy, it also pays to have a very intelligent strategy. I made reference to a couple of books, one of which was a book by Eric Riers, The Lean Startup. And he talks about different strategies that as an innovator you can embrace to your own benefit, but it also helps to pick up different strategies from around, learning to be flexible, learning to work with different people, communication strategies, and so many other things. Also in day 1, we talked about designing for simplicity, and this is because I had looked at a few of the innovations that you're putting together, and I noticed that in some cases there is an over-concentration of text and an attempt to provide as much information in one page. My thinking is the simpler the better, and I found that that tends to work very well for most audiences. On day 2, which was yesterday, we touched on going to market, and in this we talked about building trust. I shared a couple of my personal experiences in which I managed to build trust with some clients who are presently the core clients my company relies upon or delivers services to and consequently receives payment from. But in the event that you can't meet every one of your clients, I've discovered that writing articles sometimes is equated to building trust with people, because when you write an article, you're sharing your thoughts on a particular subject. I use the example of a carpentry shop, but you could use it for whatever innovation you're working on. If you're building an online ticketing system, you could use the same. Write an article about travel and then relate that to your online ticketing system. Write an article about producing agriculture, doubling your production in a farm, and then relate that to the advisory service that you're providing through an online system. Whatever it is, when you write an article, people take time and read it, and that way you also have an opportunity to target your audience or your interested clientele. And they begin to build a relationship with you because of the articles that you're spewing out there. You can do this using social media, and that was one of the things I pointed out. And I shared a tactic from a gentleman called Neil Malan, a South African, who basically showed how to use limited amounts of money, or what I would call a conservative budget, to get as much traction through social media, particularly Facebook. He's particularly good at Facebook. Then there's also the aspect of word of mouth. The example I used yesterday was one about Ponzi schemes. But Ponzi schemes tend to thrive because people talk about them. In Uganda, we have several ISPs that have become pretty popular, mainly through word of mouth, because one person uses a service, falls in love with it, tells their friends, and so on and so forth. So that is one way to get your product into the hands of as many people. And then I also mentioned the element of a free consultation, which is a smart trick that some legal firms have used in Uganda. They do pro bono work for you. You get a sense for how they work. You get to understand their ethic, and you fall in love with them. Next thing you know, you're hiring them on retainer. In other cases, dentists have also used this. One dentist in the US did a free consultation and basically got a couple of clients to come in. I gave that example from a gentleman called Russell Brunson. Now, if I keep throwing out lots of names, don't you worry. I am going to prepare a cheat sheet. Hopefully we'll have that out tomorrow, which you can then benefit from. You can look at all the authors that I'm referring to and learn a thing or two from them, or alternatively pick up their books and become as informed or even become a lot more informed than I am. Let's talk about scaling sustainably. To scale, you effectively need to have a product. Otherwise, what else would you be scaling? The point is you need to have a functional product, and your objective is to get into more markets. So think of it this way. If you're building a payment processing system, your objective is to ensure that you get that payment processing system into the hands of as many clients as possible. If you're building it in Mozambique and you're probably starting with Maputo, you want to get it into other towns and then later on scale to Malawi, maybe start with Lilongwe and then move on to Blantyre, depending on what your plan is. The whole idea is in scaling, you're not looking at staying where you are, you're looking at going further. Scaling introduces the aspect of going far, going beyond your borders, going beyond your known horizons. And as innovators, we sometimes are limited or constrained by the frame of mind in which we operate. And that is why I bring up this African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you'd like to go far, you best go with others. I've seen that a lot in my own life or in my own work. But instead of talking a lot about me, let me share a couple of examples, as I love to do. I'll start off with this gentleman called John C. Maxwell, who makes reference to some epic examples, which I am sure we shall benefit from. He wrote a book entitled The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And in that book, one of the chapters was the law of the leader, and he gave two examples in this particular chapter. The first one was about Apple, which I'm sure the majority of us, or literally all of us, know about Apple. Apple's story starts around the 70s, I think 1970, where Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs got together to build the Apple Macintosh computer, as it was called at the time. Wozniak was the tech genius, and some of us might fall into that category. He basically understood how to put together a system, transistors, and so many other things. His nickname was actually the Wizard of Wars, which I thought was a really cool name. Steve Jobs, on the other hand, as John Maxwell says, had a leadership lead so much higher than Wozniak's. Steve Jobs saw the opportunity to take what Wozniak was working on and turn it into a global player. And today, that's what Apple is. In this context, what I'm driving at is the emphasis on the fact that there were two people working together, a partnership. This begins to take us back to that African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with others. So let's get back to the story about Apple. Generally, we all know what happened. Steve Jobs went through a number of situations, being kicked off from the board and so on and so forth. But today, Apple is a global player. Second example, McDonald's. I don't know whether it's McDonald's. Forgive me, I'm Ugandan, so my accent might be butchering the name. However, the two brothers behind it, Dick and Maurice McDonald, started the company, or started McDonald's, in the 30s or thereabout, and within a 10-year span had built it into a powerful restaurant. What you've got to understand is that Dick and Maurice were geniuses in the kitchen. They were exceptional, which explains anyway why McDonald's is pretty popular. By the 50s, they had built the restaurant into a powerful business. They had optimized processes and they were really good managers. But they decided to partner with Ray Kroc because even though the profits from the restaurant were phenomenal, because by the 50s they were considered as being part of the town's elite, that is Dick and Maurice, they decided to partner with Ray Kroc because they wanted to scale a whole lot further. The beauty about that partnership is that Ray Kroc saw McDonald's as being a global player, not just a single restaurant. Remember the story about the old man that I had shared on day one? This old man was in very much the same situation that Dick and Maurice were in, because for him, he set up his supermarket, grew it phenomenally, but did not see himself scaling further. Dick and Maurice realized they had a similar situation on their hands, and that's why they partnered with Ray Kroc. And here's the interesting thing, between 1995 and 1959, 4 years apart, Ray Kroc succeeded in opening about 100 restaurants. That's about 25 restaurants a year, if we go by just averages. And 4 years later, there were over 500 McDonald's restaurants. This is all a result of Ray Kroc's influence, because Ray Kroc saw McDonald's as a global player, and for him, his leadership lead was so high, he was able to scale the business, not from just one restaurant, but to multiple restaurants. This is something the old man I talked about in day one could have significantly benefited from. However, you have to realize that the old man potentially had a mindset issue. Perhaps there were people he could have partnered with. There were probably Ray Krocs he could have partnered with, but he never had that opportunity, or he never visualized that as a good option. Dick and Morris instead looked ahead and said, this is actually going to benefit us. Now, if you read a little deeper into their story or their history, from what I gather, Ray Kroc actually bought the rights to McDonald's and ultimately grew it into a significant global player. The point is, the partnership between Dick and Morris McDonald, as well as Ray Kroc, resulted in a phenomenal scaling of what was once one restaurant into an incredible chain of restaurants and a business model that has been adopted the world over today. Which would lead us to the one question: how does one scale? When you think about a restaurant, or at least within this context, people would say, if Dick and Morris had a recipe that the world had fallen in love with, by opening up multiple restaurants, are Dick and Morris going to be the ones who are going to flip the burgers, or who are going to basically prepare the meals in the multiple restaurants? That tells you it's not possible to do that. But one of the things they could do is they could package their recipe so that it could be applied or distributed within the different restaurants. I'm not sure about the dynamics, but one thing I know is, for somebody to embrace the concept of scaling, whereby you have multiple chains, or whereby your business grows beyond your borders, beyond your line of sight, you have to stop working in your business and begin working on your business. This is a quote I got from Gary Pearson in his book, Software Secrets. And I suddenly realized that if I localize that to myself, there was a time I was actually working in my business. I could actually comfortably say, this old man was caught up in that cycle. He was definitely working in his supermarket and not doing much about working on the business or on the concept. So what does working in your business versus working on your business mean? Think about my example. I started my company, and for the first 2 years, once I got a couple of clients, I was the one delivering the invoices, I was the one making the software updates. A couple of times I would call in a few friends who would assist me with, let's say, server configuration. They were really good at it. But for the most part, I tended to be doing most of the work. What did that do? Monday to Friday, I was busy doing all the work that kept the company going. Because software maintenance might seem like a minor thing, however, it can get very intense. Those of you that are building software platforms, you're going to probably find yourselves doing a lot of maintenance, especially when users start using the system, because they're going to discover all sorts of bugs. Remember the examples I showed you previously where I had to work through unstructured data, localize it into structured data? That is one of the situations where you find yourself working in your business. Whenever you're the one who's going and doing the negotiations of the contracts, you're the one signing the contracts, you're the one delivering the invoices, before long, you're not going to have a lot of time to take a step back, look at the business and ask, in which direction should we be going? This is exactly what Gary Pearson warns about, because it says, eventually you find yourself working in your business. When I hired some accountants to help me with my books, one of the first things they suggested was that I should have hired an office administrator, which eventually I did. When they told me about hiring an office administrator, they said the office administrator will take care of some of the mundane tasks, delivering of invoices, delivering of contracts, picking up documentations, taking care of pre-qualifications, and so many other things. Generally, what an office admin does. Now, when I found myself hiring an office admin, I realized I needed to draw out a plan to scale, because suddenly I had a little more time on my hands, but I needed to draw out a solid plan. So every time you're thinking about scaling, don't just think in terms of 1 year, think long term, because after all, Bill Gates makes a very valid statement when he says, most people actually overestimate what they can do in 1 year, but underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years. In 1 year, I knew I could hire an administrator, I could hire a designer, I could hire a couple of programmers. But I knew that in 10 years, if I manage to master the art of working with teams and communicating properly with the teams, I could put together a world-class team that would allow me to scale phenomenally. And this is one of the things I encourage all of us to do as we begin planning for scaling. Because scaling means you are taking your company from just your immediate line of sight to the next horizon. One would question, as we lay out the plan, what exactly do we have to do? Now, in my example, I told you I started by hiring a couple of staff, but this is after the company had achieved certain traction. So you begin to notice there is a pattern that is being repeated. One, as you plan for growth, the pattern that repeats is fundamentally, you need to have a functional product. Or at the very least, you need to have something that is working, something that you can deliver to your clients. Without a product, it's going to be hard to convince the world it's going to be hard to literally scale. In the case of Apple, they had the very first version of the Apple Macintosh. In the case of McDonald's, they had the first restaurant. In the case of the old man, he had his supermarket. This tells us that predominantly you need to have a product on the road. You need to have something that people can work with. Whether it is you who has built that product or whether you've done it as a team, the point is you need to first of all have something, some kind of traction that you can sell to your clientele. The second bit is you need to put together a team, or what I would call develop partnerships. Now, some of you might already be working in teams, which is a good thing. I commend you for that. Alternatively, you might be in a situation where you're the sole entrepreneur. In this situation, you're probably the one who's doing the bulk of the work. Or you might have split the tasks equally. Whatever the case is, if you want to go far, like we pointed out, you need to think about moving with others. Now, while we talk about this, let me bring up a quick question. It's the only poll that I have for today, and today's session is going to be really, really brief. Are you a solo entrepreneur or part of a team? I hope. Great. Here is the question. So today it's a very simple question. Just one question. Are you a solo entrepreneur or part of a team? Or are you somewhere in between, which is the situation I was in? We're going to take just about 20 seconds. This shouldn't really take us too long to answer. So I'm going to ask each of you, give me your answers, because I want to make sure that I understand the crowd that I am talking to. I know many of you seem to be working in teams from the information I've seen, but I just thought I'd put this out there. Okay, 5 seconds to go. 3, 2, done. I think let's see the results. Wonderful. The majority of you are part of a team. There's a couple of you that are operating like I did, somewhere in between, and a few of you are solo entrepreneurs. So we have a fairly distributed audience here, the majority being a part of a team, so that's a good thing. All right, thanks a lot. Now let me jump on to the next bit that I was referring to. When you think about either developing a team, since some of you are already in a team, this is really addressed mostly to those who are either solo entrepreneurs or are operating somewhere in between. The bit about developing a team or putting together a team is fairly straightforward. There are key people that you need. Typically, you need the developer, if you're especially working on some technical solution. Then you also need ordinarily a person who's going to take care of the administrative overhead, the legalities, paperwork, contracts, as well as invoices, as and when those begin to happen. But once your business has attained traction, once your innovation has gone live and you have some traction, it pays to develop partnerships. What are partnerships? Partnerships sometimes involve you working with other businesses or other companies. My company has gotten into several partnerships. I think I've even lost count of how many we've actually gotten into. These partnerships usually revolve around the deployment of a product. One company will tell me they have been contracted to develop a product. However, their technical team is overly engaged, so they can't develop it on time. And they'll ask me if my technical team can take on the work. We then agree on a couple of terms. We'll say this is what you need to do. That tells you a lot about partnerships, that if a partnership is to succeed, it helps a lot when you agree on the terms of how the partnership is going to work. In this case, I'm talking about, let's say, coming up with a new company. One of the partnerships I just gave as an example is where I am subcontracted to deliver work. That's probably not really a partnership, it's more of a subcontracting arrangement. But there are other times when my company partners with another to deliver a product. When we do such a partnership, we need to have very clear terms about what is each company going to get out of this. Assume we make a profit of $1,000. How does that money get split? Sometimes we're in partnership with 2 other companies, sometimes it's a partnership with 1 company. Now, partnerships are built on trust. So by the time you get to this level, you definitely need to have built a substantial amount of trust within yourselves. Usually that trust is probably within just the CEOs or the team leaders. In addition to that, you need to get over your fear of your ideas being stolen. That is why I talked about dealing with fear in the very first place. But back to what's on the screen. Think about a partnership and the drawing up of the terms. You have to be clear that so-and-so will take 35%, this other person's probably going to take 50% or 40%. Take a look at what I have put under Martin Mugabe. His tasks are very clear. Grow sales to $10,000 per month by December 2020. We're currently in May 2020. That tells you Martin has gotten himself approximately 6 months within which he has to meet this target. If he fails, we have to be clear about what the terms state will happen. Otherwise, you're going to end up with situations where some people are dead weight in the partnership, and you do not want that because it can lead to the failure, the epic failure of the partnership. I have seen that happen. It has happened to me before. You don't want to go through that. But remember, if you want to go far, it pays to go with others. And when you're going with others, it's important to have the terms clearly laid out. Why I'm going as far as indicating dates is because, in the words of Brian Tracy, a goal without a deadline is just a discussion. So have deadlines clearly stipulated. Of course, when you look at somebody like Simon Chiwindi, row number 2, it simply states he's developing the applications. I haven't put deadlines on this one for a reason, because certain tasks are repetitive or they are recurrent. And then, of course, look at someone like Martha, who's the CEO. And one of the things that she has is a deadline, but then she also has other things like general administration for which you can't particularly set a deadline. This is just a breakdown of how you can come up with the percentages. Actually, it's a breakdown showing a partnership structure. It's very simple at its most basic, but there might be more complicated partnerships that you want to get into, especially to scale the business. This is probably what Dick and Morris did when they were working with Ray Kroc. I don't know what dynamics they had. However, let me share with you a quick URL that would guide you on how to put together these percentages, and that is founders.com. Visit it in your own free time. I'll include it within the cheat sheet or the list that I'll be circulating eventually. But founders.com helps you when you are getting into a partnership and defining the terms or the roles that each of the stakeholders is going to play. Especially when you're thinking about scaling, expanding the business, this will be very handy. I have used this on a couple of occasions. Usually when people come together under a partnership to say, okay, we want to grow the business to this and this level, people are notorious for coming up with random percentages that they believe are entitled to them. I am the CEO. I am the one bringing in the starting capital. Consequently, I must be getting 80% of the returns. And yet when you look back at a number of the tasks that are going to be undertaken, it might turn out that I am not entitled to 80%, but rather I'm entitled to 49%. This particular URL will help you, especially in structuring that. It uses some kind of artificial intelligence, which I found to be very helpful. And in the end, gives you some reasonable estimates. So it's helped me a lot, and I'm hopeful it will do the same for you. Once you have put together your team, as well as developed your partnership, I always encourage you to do this. Following the agile approach, go back and revisit what you have done. Iterate, look back at the product, look again at the partnership and say, is there anything we need to modify? Are there changes we need to make? Is somebody delivering on their requirements? Is somebody failing? If somebody is failing, what are we supposed to do? That's the reason I have this final bit about review and adopt. Now, to do all of this, you have to embrace a certain mindset. And in Uganda, we have this common mindset that I've encountered amongst many of the business community, which is that I would rather be 100% owner of a $10,000 business or idea than be a 10% owner of a $1 million or $1 billion business. or idea. That's very common in Uganda. And if that's the same mindset you're operating with, it's going to be difficult for you to get into partnerships. So the reason I'm sharing this is just so that you take that to heart. And while you marinate upon that, think about Bill Gates, who only owns 1.3% of Microsoft, and Zuckerberg, who presently holds about 20% of Facebook. In Zuckerberg's case, it's between 20 and 28%, depending on the type of shares you're looking at. The reason I'm sharing these examples is just to help you embrace the mindset that you can actually benefit substantially from getting into a partnership and not trying to be the sole owner of a small idea. If you want to grow, if you want to scale, be ready to get into partnerships. That's why the African proverb anyway says, if you want to go fast, you know what to do. And if you want to go far, you also know what to do. So let's talk about a few of the scaling strategies. These are strategies that you can employ to help you take your business to the next level. By taking your business to the next level, it just means going beyond your border. Once you've attained certain traction, how do you go into other markets? How do you expand? In the case of my company, one thing we noticed is that the product that we license fundamentally to our clients, we really can't sell it beyond the borders of the country because the specs are terribly specific to Uganda. So instead, what we've done is we began building other products which we can expand or sell to other countries and beyond the borders of Uganda. This might be the same strategy you want to embrace, and because of that, we've also had to embrace partnerships as well as working with other companies to achieve this. So these are some of the scaling strategies that I'd like to share with you. I'm going to talk a bit about the marketing angle and then also share one particular strategy on the tech side and share an example of how valuable those all are. Let's talk about the marketing angle. You all know how to get into different markets. I already talked about this one yesterday, that is in day 2 of 3. But there's a gentleman called J. Abraham who gave a little gem that I found very beneficial. He says a referral generated customer will normally spend more money. He actually gave a certain percentage, which I've just forgotten, negotiate less, and buy more often. When we talk about referrals, one might question, what is a referral? I use the example of the ISPs in Uganda. When somebody made a referral of a particular ISP to me, I didn't really question too much. I said, how good are they? And they said, well, they're good. They give unlimited data, give about 10 Mbps, and that's currently the link I am on. And then my next question was, and what's the cost per month? When they told me the cost, I said, okay. Immediately, I had all the answers. I hadn't seen a billboard from this particular ISP. And when I was told that I am within the coverage zone for that ISP, got in touch with the ISP. When I signed on, I barely ever negotiated, or rather, I barely even negotiate with them about their rates. Reason being, I'm relying on the element of trust from a referral. If I trust the person that told me about this ISP, I'm likely going to sign up with them. The same thing has happened in many other situations, but the whole point is it just goes to underscore what J. Abraham said. So how would you employ a referral within your innovation? Those of you that are building ticketing systems or online payment platforms, even websites. Now, the screen on the right, the interface on the right, just shows a particular system that my company is currently doing alpha testing on. And it has an option for invite other businesses to use ShareTicket, which is the platform. When somebody does this, what it's going to do is it's going to generate an email and send it to the particular email address that has been specified. That's one way to get referrals right within your mobile app. If you're doing a web app, you can also build that functionality in, but it just gives you an idea of how you can get referrals. And this is a low-cost way. Why? It's going to use email. What are you paying for that? Literally peanuts. So that's just one idea on how to scale. It's a valuable tactic, and it's something that you can always thank me for later on. When it comes to paying our sales team, this is something I picked up from Garrett Pearson. He stated that when it comes to paying our sales team, we found that starting out with a base wage and a commission is best. And then if possible, moving them to commission only. By the time you're thinking of a sales team, you inevitably have attained some degree of traction. And that's why I started by stating, when you're talking about scaling, you have attained a certain modicum of activity or traction within your operations. And so you need to sometimes evaluate, do we need a sales team. When I was reading the book Software Secrets, this gentleman, Garrett Pearson, said in their case, they've had situations where they've needed a sales team, other situations where they haven't needed a sales team. I understand the product GitHub doesn't actually have a sales team. Something I found very interesting. Now, I don't remember where I read that, but it blew my mind away. And if you ever consider getting a sales team, there are times when sales teams are very beneficial. They're very helpful because they help you scale your business. So the question really is, when will you need a sales team? And when you get a sales team on board, what model are you going to be adopting with them? Gary Pearson holds to the opinion that in the beginning, start out with the base wage, which is you give them something like, say, $50 a month, I don't know, maybe $100, depending on what your resource basket is, and then also add a commission over that. However, later on, you can move them purely to commission. Now, why I'm talking about a sales team is because one of the fintechs I have worked extensively with recently revealed to me that their sales team wasn't performing to the standard that they had expected or that they were expecting. And this was a conversation between me and their CEO, and he revealed that of all their sales, let's say the company's total revenues are at about $1,000, hypothetically. The sales team is responsible for only approximately $150 of that, which is about 15%. So I asked him, where do the majority of your sales come from? And he said, it's relationships that I as the CEO have with prospective clients and existing clients. And that got me thinking, do you actually need a sales team at this point in time? It's not, will you need one? There's a time and place for everything. The question is, do you need one right now? Because they're seriously considering flashing the entire sales team. And of course, this is something that they're still working out. But you might find yourself in a similar situation where you question, do I need a sales team? But even if I do, how should I operate with them? Because sales teams can actually help you scale your growth. Garrett's example, in one of the apps that he built, the sales team was phenomenal. They actually helped triple or 10x the growth. In another app that they did, not so much. So it's a balance. You have to find the appropriate angle. But then when you think of getting a sales team, plan appropriately. Another way to scale a business is to rely on what we call upsells or sales funnels. And the example on the screen is one of an antivirus solution I presently have on my laptop. An upsell is whereby you provide extra value for the same product, but at an additional cost. And this way you get people to pay more, and that literally allows you to expand your business or scale your growth. And it's a very sustainable model because it doesn't cost you much to put together an upsell. Some people might ask, how do I improve or how do I provide an upsell to a product such as an online ticketing system? For an online ticketing system, you could think of, let's say, a discount plan. You say, if you pay $5 a month off of every ticket, you're going to get some kind of discount. Or you're going to get promotional items pushed to your account at any point in time, or you're going to get 1 month free, or you'll be added to this and this probably marketing scheme. I mean, I'm just really making this up as I go along, so it's probably not as brilliant as it would be. However, the whole idea behind an upsell is that you're giving people extra value, and if people want that extra value, they definitely have to pay extra money to achieve that. When I look at the upsell that is described on the screen, I was looking through it and I was thinking, okay, block malware, this is free, get advanced anti-ransomware protection. No, I don't usually visit any sites that would probably put me in the danger zone. However, it could come in beneficial at some point. Be instant warned of threats on your Wi-Fi. My Wi-Fi is generally locked at the MAC level, so I'm not too worried about that one. And then avoid fake sites for safer shopping. Okay, this might be interesting. This might attract me into signing up for this upsell. And in the process, I'll begin giving them an extra $2.89 a month. The whole concept behind an upsell is you visualize something that your clients would want and you present it to them. Zoom has a very interesting upsell. Every call is free. However, if you want to be able to talk for more than 40 minutes, which I find myself doing a lot, you then have to upgrade your account. That's an upsell. An upsell sometimes is the same as a sales funnel, just depends on how you package it. A sales funnel basically just means you're going to age and ascend the relationship with your customers, and you give them extra value as they go along. Usually, if people have enjoyed what you've given them at first, most of us enjoy the freedom or the efficiency of a Zoom call, then most people will be interested in the upsell or the sales funnel that Zoom wants to get us into. And that's the whole concept behind an upsell. Then, on the technical side, this was on the marketing angle. On the technical side, there's what we call technical scaling. Technical scaling means you host with scalable solutions. Why am I talking specifically about hosting? It's because many of our products, if you're building an online ticketing system or if you're dealing with a payment platform, it's sitting on a server. Even if it's a VSLA app, Village Lending and Savings Association app, it's most probably sitting on a server somewhere. That server needs to be able to handle the load at any one time. There's an app my company is presently beta testing. I think that's the next level after alpha. We are currently beta testing it, but when we first began the testing, the server crashed, courtesy of the load. And that freaked us out because the server only had approximately 30 GB of space. And in no time, we had exhausted the 30 GB. That made us freak because if this had happened while we were doing live testing with actual customers, this would have gotten us into a lot of trouble. The telecom would more than likely have rescinded the contract. Now that told us we need to have a server that is able to handle the load, has enough disk space, has enough memory, doesn't have bandwidth challenges, and so on and so forth. All of this might sound technical, but what we're just saying is we want to have a server that can scale with the load. If the demand increases, the server needs to be able to handle that. At the moment, the industry standard seems to be Amazon Web Services. However, it's advisable to talk to the technical person in your team to make sure you cater for some of these eventualities. You may not have to sign up for Amazon Web Services right now, but it's always helpful to plan for this in the long run. Why I'm bringing this up is because my experience revealed that if you do not have solid infrastructure, more than likely your product is not going to be able to be enjoyed by the audience that you're presenting it to. This, in summary, wraps up my chatter on scaling sustainably. Now, I would love to encourage you to post any questions you might have. Like I said, my intention was to keep today's session brief, but I thought I would share with you a few hints on how you can plan for and how you can go through the process of scaling effectively. Now, one of the things I know is that many of you may not have to deal with the concept of scaling right now, but it's something that I encourage you to plan for. Somebody said, we fail to our highest level of preparation, meaning if you plan effectively, you should be ready to deal with all manner of eventualities that will pop up. The other thing I'm going to mention, and I'm throwing it up onto the screen, is that now that we've wrapped up these 3-day sessions or these 3 webinars, what I would love to encourage you to do is to put what I have just said into practice. Use the different tools I talked about to try and package your presentation, anticipate the audience you're going to present it to, and I would invite you to do a mock pitch session with me. I'm giving you the whole of next week. That is the week of, I think it's somewhere in June. I'm just looking at my calendar right now. And that is the week of 1st to the 5th of June. I'll give those who are interested 5 to 15-minute intervals in which you can pitch your idea to me. And I'll give you my thoughts on what you need to change. This might help you as you prepare for the wider pitch sessions. I'm told most countries have already finished their country pitches. However, there are those that will have qualified for the regional pitch. On the other hand, if you'd also just love to refine your idea, even if you didn't make it through to the country finals, or even if you didn't make it to those levels, there is no harm in getting a second opinion on the concept that you're working on. You can pitch that to me in 5 to 15 minutes, send me a Zoom invite, I'll let you know if my schedule permits that. That is throughout the course of next week. And I can give you a couple of ideas, give you a couple of pointers. I've done this for a few friends whereby they've pitched their ideas to me or their concepts to me before they go and do a regional pitch or a country pitch. And I pointed out to them where they are potentially failing. Sometimes the concept is not very clear from the very start. Other times you're panicking to put things together. This might just be a dress rehearsal, just to help you polish up. So that is my thinking, that's my offer at this point in time. And I'd like to thank you all for giving me your attention. And I think I can hand it back to Nicola, given we have, I think, about 15 more minutes.
Thank you very much, Sam. We do have one question in the Q&A box. We have two scaling plans. One is selling space like Google Drive or Dropbox, and the second is upselling the product. Is that too much?
Okay, that is two scaling plans, selling space like Google Drive or Dropbox, and the second is upsell the product. To be honest, I can't turn around and say it is too much or too little. The answer to that would be, how have your customers responded to your scaling plans? Because the first scaling plan might prove to be a success. Remember at one point I talked about split testing, or what you call A/B testing. If people respond to an offer that you're making, you definitely know there's a demand for it. But if people don't respond to the offer, then either you need to change the value proposition or you need to change the way you're phrasing the offer. People might not understand it. Right now, for instance, I'm thinking, you're talking of scaling plans, and I'm wondering, are these scaling plans or upsells? Which exactly are you talking about? Because a scaling plan gets me thinking, this is a strategy about how you're going to scale. Notice I'm already asking questions about the question you're asking. And that might throw off some of your customers, because how do you present this to the customers? Usually when the human mind doesn't understand something, especially if you're trying to sell me something and you make it too complicated, typically my answer is no, just because I don't understand it. So that's why I'm saying two answers in this situation. One, make it very clear. Two, do split tests. Deploy the product, sell it to the customers, and see if customers respond. If they respond positively, there, you have your answer. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Sam. So we have another question. Is a sales team unnecessary for some type of businesses? For example, WhatsApp amassed users in the region without a sales team. And how do I know if my business needs a sales team?
Wonderful. I like that question. And while I'd love to say in some businesses it is not necessary, I found that our definition of a sales team might vary. We might be thinking of a sales team as the typical person who goes out and talks to customers. And yes, that's really the typical conventional definition. There are some businesses that do not need that. I think I gave the example of GitHub. I think I read it somewhere that GitHub actually did not have a sales team. WhatsApp, you've actually given a very good example, probably did not have a sales team, though you might be surprised to find that the WhatsApp business angle actually has a sales team. At least I know there's WhatsApp business. So they might have a sales team, I'm really not sure. But I was careful not to say you do not need a sales team. My point was, and as you see it on the screen, when will you need a sales team? You might need a sales team 20 years into the future, when the competition is giving you a bloody nose. Or you might never need a sales team, at least in the next 50 years. It's a question of when. Then on the other hand, you might also have indirect sales agents. These are people who probably talk about the product and get momentum. Those sometimes are indirect sales agents, not the conventional types who go around selling. So how to know whether your business needs a sales team? I guess the one question is, how easy is it to get people to know about your business? If you set yourself a target and say, I'm going to sell this business or this concept to 100 people in the next 1 week, and you meet that target, you might actually be on the path to answering that question and say, I actually don't need a sales team. Now, as one person said, if at first you succeed, set a higher target. So now go for a new target of, let's see, can I actually get this business into the hands of 500 people without a sales team? And you simply have a tactic that you're using, an online marketing campaign, and it works. There you have your answer. So I know I haven't given a straight answer, but I hope that helps.
Thanks,
Okay.
Sam. Next question. Kindly advise how to handle the need to spread the word about my product or service versus the start small then scale.
All right. How to spread the word about my product or service. There is an author I came across called Jim Rohn, and he said, when you're thinking of spreading the word about something or even approaching people to talk to, don't over-engineer it. Don't overthink it. Try not to get into that situation where you overanalyze the metrics and you get paralyzed. I'm sure you heard that word, paralysis by analysis. You spend so much time crunching numbers, you never get started. He said, if you really have to start on something, pick up a stone, throw it up into the air and talk to the nearest person that the stone falls next to. That's one way to get word out. Now, while that is a really unconventional method, what you could do is start by talking to your immediate family or talk to your friends and tell them, hey guys, I'm working on something. It's a ticketing system. Now, I know ticketing system kind of stuck in my head, so I use it all the time. It's a ticketing system. Would you guys care to test it and let me know what you think? When they test it, somebody's probably going to be passing by, or they're going to probably be looking at their phone as they're testing your system, and somebody will ask, hey, what's that you're doing? And it's like, I'm ordering a ticket online. And that's how the word starts to spread. All you did was talk to your immediate family. Another tactic I came across was go to my mail system if I'm using Firefox or Outlook, extract all the email addresses that I have for all my contacts, go to Facebook, create a custom audience, and I market it to them, just to make sure Facebook markets it to people that I know. Now that's one tactic. You have to pay a little money for that one, but that's just the starting part, spreading the word. I could actually send an SMS to a bunch of people. One of my friends did something where he collected phone numbers off of, I think, the public space. He was walking around and he would collect phone numbers off of poles where people were advertising particular products, things like hair products, because he was targeting the hair product people. He got all the phone numbers and then began sending them SMSs because he knows that these phone numbers are connected to actual numbers. And he got a couple of people to respond to his advert because he knew that these are people who are dealing in hair products. And definitely, if I send them SMSs, I'll probably get a couple of people to respond. So when you say versus start small, then scale, I'm thinking spreading the word usually is starting small. Spreading the word, you start by probably the people nearest to you, the offices next to where your office is located, your immediate family. That's kind of starting small. Or the people in your phone book, you tell them about what you're doing. Other times, you even just go online and write a post. When you write a post, people find out about it. So when you talk about spread the word about my product versus start small, I think we're talking about the same thing. But once you have the critical mass and people have given you feedback about your product, or maybe they've told you it's complicated, I don't understand this part, then you can start thinking of what changes do I make to my product? And then do I go back to the same people that I had marketed it to? Or do I simply expand? Expanding is now where you do a sponsored ad on something like LinkedIn or Facebook, or even you use Google. Google has very incredible targeting systems. And you could say, what would people be searching for? And then you define an ad around what people will be searching for. That should basically offer some assistance in that area. Next.
Okay, next question. When can you start hiring a sales team, or at what stage?
All right, hard to say honestly, but typically the easiest answer for that is that when your sales have stagnated. That would be the easiest answer. if your sales have been climbing and you've been plotting them against a graph, and you notice they are either slowing or stagnating, then you start talking to a sales team or potentially asking people who are experts in sales how you can increase your outreach. And usually anybody who's worth their salt will have a couple of ideas on how you can do that. But once you plot out your sales, you plan around that. Be careful about hiring a sales team in the very beginning. You might end up forking out money that you do not have. So what I mean by when your sales have plateaued basically means you've actually gotten some kind of cash coming in and you can afford a sales team. You do not want to start them off on pure commission. Sometimes it helps to give them a safety net. And then after that, evaluate that model. And as you noticed, Garrett Pearson said, in our case, we started with the base wage and commission. And then after that, moved them to commission only, by which time they've kind of gotten the hang of it. I hope that's helpful for that answer.
Thanks, Sam. So let's do one more question, and then everybody else that's asked questions, if you could ask Sam on Slack, or what we will do is download the questions and then give them to Sam to answer. So I think this last question is, what is your thought on having more than one price point? As for example, 3 for a product to cater across different income brackets, and the risk of having too many options to communicate?
Good question. I say it's a good question because my business currently has, well, for the same item, we've been charging different prices to different clients. And it's pretty weird that not all the clients have figured it out. None of them ever raised it as a matter of fact. But in your case, it is possible that what you're asking is having more than one price point for a product. So you're talking about being able to charge different prices for the same product. If you're in different markets, in my case, my industry is a little segregated. They don't always communicate about how much they're paying, so nobody seems to mind being charged a different amount from another client. But if you're selling your product in different countries, you could afford to have slightly different price points. Or if you're dealing with people in different income brackets, if the audience does not express concern about being charged differently, I wouldn't say there is a problem with that. However, I would also go forward to add that depending on the regulatory framework in which you're operating, I know in Uganda the telecoms cannot suddenly have different prices for the same item to different income brackets. Why? Because the telco regulator says all your prices must be standardized. If you're selling data 1 megabyte at, let's say, $1 a megabyte, it's $1 a megabyte to everybody. The corporate rate should be, I don't think they actually permit for different corporate rates versus retail rates, but that I would have to look at the regulation clearly. So you'd have to understand what the regulation states within your country. That is one thing. If you're doing a test just to find out how the market responds to different price points, I would say that is fine, but don't hold on to that for too long, because there's also what we call the moral aspect. So I know I've given you different answers, but the point is having one price point for 3 different categories across different income brackets, there is a risk associated with that one. However, depending on the market in which you are, that risk may be unfounded. So it really depends on where you're operating. And then your second question, which is the risk of having too many options to communicate. Best example would maybe be, look at what has happened to, I think, the Samsung phones. Once upon a time, we knew which phone was out. And suddenly we have, I think, the Galaxy Edge, then there's the Galaxy this, and there's the Duos that. Suddenly I have difficulty figuring out which product is out there. You run the risk of diluting your product. I actually heard that even Colgate has so many brands of Colgate out there that at one point they came up with a guide on how to select the ideal toothpaste for you. This I came across when reading a book by Simon Sinek, Start with the Why. So my advice would be careful about that angle. sometimes simpler is better. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks very much, Sam. For those who are asking, the presentation and the recording of this webinar will be put onto the Static Innovation website along with the previous 2 days worth of material. So we've come to the end of our webinar. Thank you very much, Sam, for the wonderful presentation, and thank you to everybody who has attended.
Thank you too. Thanks everyone. I will attempt to respond to the other questions on the Slack channel, but let's keep the conversation going and have yourself a lovely evening. Thanks, Nicola.
Thanks, Sam. Bye.
Bye-bye.